on the Comcast Business Hotline, Mr. Scott Lauber, who does a great job covering the Phillies for the Inquirer. How are you today, Scott?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Doing well. Thank you for coming on. We appreciate it. I'm looking at your story, Let's Play Real or Overreaction after Phillies opener, Alec Bohm revenge tour, contact concerns, and more. Let's start with Bohm right at the top. A lot of trade rumors and all that kind of stuff. He steps up to the plate in extra innings and does a lot of what he did for most of the season last year, drives in a couple of runs, and you said that revenge tour thing is real, not an overreaction. Could you elaborate on that for us a little bit?
Yeah, I'll say this. So my favorite day on the baseball calendar is opening day. My second favorite day is the day after, which is overreaction day. Because as I wrote, opening day is all we have to go on, right? You have opening day, and then you usually have an off day, and you have nothing to talk about except for one game for 2 whole days, because that's all you've got. And so what we tend to do is we tend to focus on everything we saw on that first day, and some of it's real and some of it's not. And we know that one game is a fraction of a baseball season. So, yeah, I mean, there was a lot to pick out from yesterday's game. Fortunately, it gives us a good day to go through it. And I just thought, of course it was Alec Bohm, right, who had to come up in the 10th inning and break that tie, because we all thought for sure, right, that he was going to be back this year. I mean, it was very, very real that they were entertaining trade offers for him. That was not smoke being blown. It was not a media creation. The Phillies went out there and said, Alec Bohm's available. Not because they wanted to necessarily trade him, but because he was a piece that could be moved more easily than a lot of others, and they thought would have considerable value coming off an all-star year. And he didn't have as much value as they thought. And I thought Alec came to spring training, and he said all the right things. And, maybe the focus was was he hurt by the fact that he was being shopped in a trade? I think, if anything, he should be motivated by the fact that the Phillies couldn't find a trade for equal value. He was more valuable to the Phillies than he was on any other team based on the returns they were getting. So if I'm Alec Bohm, I'm not angry at the Phillies. I'm saying, hello, like the rest of the league, I'm a good player. I was an all-star last year. He's not going to come out and say that. It's not who he is. It's not his personality. But that's certainly a good motivator, as good as any, for a player to go out and have a big year.
All right, let's get your thoughts a little bit on the bullpen and just start with Jordan Romano. I mean, it wasn't great. It looked like he was off with his slider. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, flag that one, right? Because it wasn't great, as you said. I will, in this case, I will put some stock into what I saw in spring training, which was a healthy pitcher. It was an effective pitcher. I mean, spring training, so you can only read so much into it. But when a guy's coming back off an injury and he looks and feels healthy in spring, I take that as a good sign. So he admitted that maybe there were some opening day nerves yesterday, first appearance for a new team after getting a 1-year contract. But he also made a good bet on himself this year that he would bounce back and have a big year. He signed a 1-year deal. So it's an important year for him. And I asked him after the game, not because it should come as any surprise. He knew going in that the Phillies don't usually start a season with a closer under Rob Thompson. They've settled on one the last 2 years, like Craig Kimbrell handled most of the closing responsibilities in the second half of 23. That was Carlos Estevez after the All-Star, after the trade deadline last year. But for most of the year, it was closer by matchups, and that's what it's going to be again. And I asked Romano, because he's used to being a closer in Toronto, if it's a little bit different, right? When you're sitting out there in the 7th inning of a close game, and the phone rings, and it might be for you. And he said, yeah, it's a little bit different. But, again, he was told that this would be the case. He was ready to pitch yesterday from the 7th inning on. He understood from watching the game that there was a pocket of right-handed hitters low in the Nationals lineup, and that he was probably going to get that pocket, whereas Alvarado was going to get the lefties in the middle. And that's what happened, and he just didn't execute yesterday. So flag it, because the velocity was down a little bit, and obviously the command was down. But it's one appearance. I'm willing to chalk it up to some of that opening day jitters. I will watch it how he looks in the next appearance, probably tomorrow or Sunday.
Another thing, Scott, we're speaking of Scott Lauber. He does a tremendous job covering the Phillies for the Inquirer. Some fans were very upset about the strikeouts and the amount of strikeouts. Alec Bohm, speaking to him after the game, made it very clear that they struggled with the shadows during the game. Was it the shadows? Is this just who they are? Is it a combination of both?
I think it's a combination of both. Look, they're not going to strike out 19 times a game. They're just not. I mean, but they're going to have their share of 10 strikeout games. I looked it up, and last year they struck out 10 or more times in 57 games. That's a little over a third of their games. So, yeah, they strike out. And it's the same offense, the same group, so you're not all of a sudden going to not strike out a lot. They're going to strike out. They're not going to strike out that much. And I don't think the shadows were like, you know, sometimes you hear players talk about shadows or other conditions, and you kind of roll your eyes and you think, well, that's excuse-making. Not really, because the Nationals struck out a ton also, 13 times in the game, 8 against Zack Wheeler. There were 8 plus, 13 for Gore had 13, so There were 21 strikeouts combined in the first 6 innings, which is when the shadows were at their worst. So the shadows definitely had an effect. If it's sunny out tomorrow, they will have an effect again. So the strikeouts were extreme. But the Phillies strike out, and that's the trade-off you make for an offense that's built the way theirs is, with a lot of home runs and a lot of power and a lot of quick strikeability, but there's also going to be a lot of strikeouts as well.
You know, one guy who went a little, I think, overlooked in yesterday's game because of, you know, the sun and because of what Gore was doing was Zack Wheeler. I mean, he was unbelievable throwing the baseball yesterday.
Yeah, he was. He was great. And I hate to say this, Ricky, because it's not fair, but, I mean, he's almost overlooked because he's always great. You know, because he's always great and or keeps you in the game more than in the game to win the game. It's very rare that Zack Wheeler goes out there and throws up a dud. So Wheeler goes 6 innings, allows a solo home run, that's it. And we say, okay, Zack Wheeler did Zack Wheeler things. You know, it's sort of unfair that we have that expectation, but we do. It sticks out when he's not good. He was really good. And, you know, in typical Zack Wheeler fashion, right, like, you know, he was asked about that home run that Keibert Ruiz hit. It was a 12-pitch at-bat, and it looked like it was a pretty good pitch, maybe in a little bit, and Ruiz did a nice job with it, and Wheeler said, I've thrown better fastballs. So Zack Wheeler, ever the perfectionist, you know, not happy with, I thought, a pretty decent pitch at the end of a 12-pitch at-bat that he gets beat on. You know, most pitchers kind of tip their cap. Wheeler says, I could have thrown a better fastball. And I think that kind of tells you how good he is and how much he wants to be that good.
Yeah, that's a good point. Bryce Harper, we were talking about how we believe he's just set for a really big year. The talk nationally hasn't been with him as much, and he's had this quiet confidence the way he's been speaking, and then obviously he gets the scoring. He gets the Phillies in the game with the home run yesterday, a nice piece of hitting there. What kind of season do you envision for Bryce Harper, assuming he's healthy? Obviously, health always the biggest factor, only because Ricky and I have been pretty bullish on him having a big year.
Yeah, I mean, I picked the Phillies to win the division, and I sort of thought, okay, well, if I'm picking them to win the division, you know, we're asked at the beginning of the season in our preview section to make a bunch of predictions and a bunch of picks, and, you know, I tell people all the time, don't clip that out and hold it against me because I'm never right. But I predicted the Phillies to win the division, and I thought, all right, well, if I'm saying that they're going to win the division, then they've got to have an MVP candidate in the mix. It's too easy to pick Shohei Ohtani every year, even though it's more than likely it's going to be Shohei Ohtani at the end of the year if he's healthy, given what he does. But, you know, I said if I'm picking the Phillies to win the division, I might as well either pick a Phillies MVP candidate or give serious consideration to one. And I just, as good as they are, I always think the Phillies go as Bryce Harper goes, right? So I think he's going to have a big year. Again, you know, assuming health. He was healthy last year for the first time in quite a while. I mean, I know he played through, you know, the elbow and the forearm and the wrist thing, or the elbow and the wrist thing, and that maybe affected his power a little bit. But, you know, again, really did not miss a considerable amount of time, missed no time with that particular injury. So I think he's going to have a big year. If you think the Phillies are going to be good, as I do, I think you've got to look at Harper and think, you know, he's going to be there in the MVP discussion at the end of the season because he's sort of the straw that stirs the drink, to borrow a Reggie Jackson line from years ago. And you saw that yesterday. You know, you saw all the strikeouts in the first 6 innings, and, oh, my gosh, they might set a record for strikeouts on opening day. If not strikeouts, it's not a franchise record. and, what is going on here? And there's, everyone's kind of panicking and thinking like this is the worst thing that could happen. And then, boom, first pitch, solo homer in the 7th inning, and it sort of settles everybody down, and everybody can take a deep breath. And, what's interesting about it is I know he wasn't happy with his swing late in spring training. He did not have a spring training home run, more proof that spring training means nothing. The results, at least, mean nothing. But he didn't have a spring training home run. He left Florida with a 0 in that category. And he said even yesterday in the batting cage, Kevin Long had to remind him that, hey, your first swing of live BP, going way back to before the games, was a home run against Nabil Prismat on a backfield. I happened to have been there and saw that day. And Harper said, I forgot all about that. So, hitting is a confidence thing, hitting is a feel thing. And I think yesterday that home run allowed him to take a breath. It allowed the Phillies to take a breath. And it really kind of shows how important he is to everything they do.
Really appreciate you coming on with us again. People should go read Let's Play Real or Overreaction after Phillies opener, Alec Bohm, Revenge Tour, Contact Concerns, and more. Enjoy yourself down there in D.C., sir, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, guys. Thanks.
All right. That was Scott Lauber on the Comcast Business Hotline. Does a tremendous job covering the Phillies for the Inquirer. Really good stuff. And the Bryce Harper thing, he's buying it, Ricky. He's buying it.
I think he's definitely on our program with that. Yeah, I mean, Scott's one of those guys who looks at it and sees it every day, and he sees a guy that's, you know what? I mean, let's face it. He's on some type of a mission this year.
Yeah, you can just tell.
Comes out in a big way on opening day, and that wasn't like a home run that was like a clap, good for me. That was like, I got us going. There we go.
And it worked. It absolutely worked. Schwarber followed it up.
Yep.
And then they found a way to win the game.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching our YouTube. If you want to help us out, go ahead and like and subscribe for us. If you liked what you saw, go right over here to our playlists and pick out whatever you want to watch.